California saw record low population growth in 2020. Well, I never. And the state lost more residents than it gained for the second consecutive year. About 136,000 more people left the state than moved in, according to data from the state's finance department released this week, making the third largest migration loss in the state's history. It'll get worse next year. In total, just 21,200 people were added between July 2019 and July 2020, and the 2020 growth rate was 0.05%, which is down from 0.23% the year prior, marking the slowest growth rate on record. Now, the state saw a similar outflow of residents when compared with last year, but the inflow was notably smaller this year, and the total population currently sits at about 39.78 million people, of which 45 million people voted in the election for the Democrats. Just saying. But as previously reported by Fox Business, cities like San Francisco, where the cost of living is notoriously high, which is deliberate, have seen an exodus of residents who have more flexibility to work remotely during the pandemic and beyond. It's got nothing to do with that. Furthermore, stay-at-home orders have been implemented intermittently since March, may have led to a lower influx of residents to California this year. Just as I warned as far back as 2014 or 15. The ongoing rush out of the big, expensive and overcrowded cities is carrying on unabated, it seems, which is good, actually. But California was a deliberate plan. But the other big cities is an example of people having enough of extortionate practices ongoing in those cities. The over-the-top housing, rents, business rents and shops will all take a hit. Buildings will and have emptied. What will big business do then? And the big question is, what happens next? The grandstanding governor of New York this week, in his wisdom, as if he hasn't got more pressing things to do, has prohibited the sale or display of the Dixie flag and other so-called hate symbols on public property, an act he admits violates the Constitution. And yes, he still did it. But does anyone think he'll just stop with flags? Neither. And the question is, why hasn't he banned himself? Because he is a symbol of hate to many New Yorkers. Anyway, it was signed into law on Tuesday, and the new bill bars anyone from selling or displaying symbols of hate on New York state property unless the symbol appears in a book, digital medium, or within an educational context. And predictably, the symbols of hate was left open-ended, with the legislation noting that it shall include, but not be limited to, symbols of white supremacy, neo-Nazi ideology, or the battle flag of the Confederacy. And Cuomo praised the legislation, declaring the US was facing a pervasive, growing attitude of intolerance and hate, and hailed the effort to help safeguard New Yorkers from the fear-instilling effects of these abhorrent symbols. If only he knew the history of New York, then the best things to do is to ban the whole of it, because New York was built upon hate, division, death, cults and crimes, and that was only the Hebrew white-collar brigade. The multi-millionaire tele-evangelist Joel Osteen netted $4.4 million in bailouts through the federal COVID-19 relief program, records show. The Houston megachurch, the largest in the nation with 52,000 weekly congregants. I was going to say something else there. Idiots is probably the best term I can use. Received the forgivable Paycheck Protection Program loan in late July, and the loan was the third highest in the Houston area during all of July and August, the outlet noted, citing federal data. Osteen, whose sermons are seen around the world, is worth an estimated $100 million, and he took the helm of the Lakewood Church following the death of his father, the founding pastor John Osteen, in 1999. Yet another fake snake oil salesman. Following on from all the previous TV evangelists of talking shit and collecting profit, whilst making themselves out as prophets. This man is a complete and utter fake. It was his father that was the spiritualist. Bit like Dolores Cannon. She's fake as well, because it was her husband who got all the information. Some of it wrong anyway. And Joel Osteen took on the business aspect of it and is a complete fake. And this is what gets me. The public is bought off at $600, and this snake, who's worth over $100 million plus, gets $4.4 million out of the stimulus bill with no payback. Forgivable paycheck protection. Now, the New York Times has been caught out this week and has finally retracted its award-winning podcast about a Canadian-born Islamic State executioner months after Ottawa discovered he'd made it all up, admitting their fact-checking was not sufficiently rigorous. It's a bit like Facebook and the BBC fact-checkers then, isn't it? Oops. Now, the paper of record has come clean about the festering hoax at the centre of its 2018 hit podcast called Caliphate. And they officially retracted the series on Friday and reassigning lead reporter Rukmini Kalimarshi off the terrorism beat. And the podcast's central narrative thread, purporting to be an eye-opening account of one man's journey from Canada into the ranks of the Islamic State in Syria, was largely fabricated. Not largely, it was. And the New York Times admitted it, acknowledging the central character had probably never even been to Syria at all, let alone committed the grisly atrocities he described in detail on the podcast. Now, the paper's statement explained that Sherazade Chowdhury, the Canadian 25-year-old who presented himself as a fearsome ISIS executioner named Abu Hazafeh, was not only not a terrorist, but during the years that he claimed to have spent slaughtering Syrians, he was actually working for his family kebab shop in Toronto, and all living with his grandparents in Pakistan. Now, Canadian authorities have charged him in September with perpetrating a terrorist hoax and a crime that carries a maximum sentence of 5 years imprisonment after a 4-year investigation. Now, Ottawa claims it had knowledge Chowdhury was making the whole thing up, even as Caliphate launched in 2018, but could not share the information at the time because the investigation was ongoing. Really? And among the more obvious pieces of evidence for the terrorist tall tales were the photos he posted, supposedly featuring his partners in crime, that were actually shot by, quote, news photographers and activist groups, unquote. So news photographers and activist groups are fabricating stuff to look real. And this brings into question a whole heap of events surrounding alleged cop shootings, doesn't it? Now, Mubin Sheikh stated that Huzaifi could be rehabilitated and that Canada needs to have an eye on him. Now, Mubin is a former security intelligence and counter-terrorism operative, and he has testified as an expert for the United Nations Security Council, the United States Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, with NATO, the National Counter-Terrorism Centre, the Special Operations Command Central Centre, and he is an external expert with the Joint Staff SMA for CENTCOM. And what this reveals is Mr. Huzaifi is an intelligence stooge, a patsy. Why else would a former security intelligence officer pass comment or intervene on this case unless Mr. Huzaifi was one of their agents? This is how it works. And this has all the hallmarks of the CIA and actors playing roles to sway public opinion to me, as it is they who need to be in Syria for financial gains is why. Now, the New York Times has a long history of falling for too good to be true false narratives, from the weapons of mass destruction hoax that helped launch the Iraq War to the never-ending stream of bogus Russiagate revelations. And like the reporters responsible for those falsehoods, Calamachi has defended her reporting by pointing out that multiple US intelligence agents backed some of the dodgiest parts of her narrative. No, they didn't back it. They created the narrative. Big difference. And that is how journalism works. Calamachi is likely another intelligence agent as well. The World Horror Organization's head should be probed over genocide, it is claimed this week, and a claim filed with the ICC by a US Nobel Peace Prize nominee, adding that the Ethiopian may be involved in many crimes at home. This is something that we covered last week with the Ethiopian military and Tigray group. Now, the current World Horror Organization Director, General Tedros, was a crucial decision maker in relation to security services actions that included killing, arbitrarily detaining and torturing Ethiopians, according to a complaint filed with the International Criminal Court. And its author, an American economist and activist, David Steinman, who was nominated for the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize, alleges that the Ethiopian biologist and health researcher had a role in atrocities committed by various Ethiopian security forces during his tenure as a high-ranking government official. Final story before the music break. Kansas Mayor Joyce Warshaw said on Tuesday in her resignation letter, and her resignation was effective immediately. Warshaw said she had been receiving threatening emails and telephone calls since being quoted in a December the 11th article about Dodge City delays in imposing a COVID-19 mask mandate, which was finally passed by the City Commission on November the 16th. She said, "We just felt like we had to do something so everyone was aware of how important it was for everybody to be responsible for each other's health and well-being. Many residents, however, have opposed the forced wearing of masks, in some cases arguing that a government mandate is unconstitutionally overreaching," which is correct. That is what you call proper activism, but there's no need to be threatening. Letting these seemingly untouchable people know we the people will no longer tolerate their actions and decisions that go against us. You don't have to be violent, nasty, aggressive or rude to them, just call them out. And this shows that it works. And with the resignation of Deborah Birx for being found out by the public as well this week, this is the way to get back at them.